back to Sinister Customs. Hope everybody is having a wonderful day. Thought I'd just get on here and kind of go over how to get more articulation or flex out of your Scx24. I guess starting off, the biggest thing to look at, you would think is probably your springs, but it's not your shocks or anything. It's actually your links and how they are set up. The first thing, depending on the amount of articulation anyway you're trying to get, is just taking your shocks off altogether and seeing just what you have to play with. I mean, because there's no point in doing everything to the shocks if you don't even have that much articulation to play with in general because of your links. So the first thing I would do, if you're trying to get an extreme amount of articulation, is just take the shocks off and see if you're binding up anywhere on your links. Like these, I have the 3D printed high clearance links. I don't know if you can see, but when I try to articulate it, it's actually hitting right there. And then also on the inside here. So that is what is stopping the front. And then the other thing is forelink. Forelinking the front as well is going to help you quite a bit. Mostly because if you look at your 3-link setup, so you got the little pivot ball here, but these two do not. So those two are fixed. So it's going to allow you just that much pivot on your front link or your front axle. And the other thing also is if you're switching to an aluminum link or something with the brass, again, focus, something with the brass, there it goes, and the O-rings, that is going to limit your articulation as well. Just like, so on the Jeep, you can tell there's just not, they're just too tight. They hold them too tight compared to your stock links. Which, if you're going for a nice, tight, firm setup, you know, like a little trail cruiser or something, that's great. But if you're going for a lot of articulation, a lot of flex, you don't want your links and everything to be tight. You want everything to be nice and loose so you can really get that flex out of things. Yeah, so there's off the vehicle. It's just, you've got so much more movement and play in there without having the O-ring stopping you. The other thing is pretty much that same concept, but on the shocks. So your stock shocks have that pivot ball. So that's going to allow when your axle drops, it's going to really allow that to pivot and go underneath the body with the axle. And then same the other way. To where, as with the aftermarket shocks having those O-rings, it just stiffens it up. Now granted, you can do just one side. A lot of them come with a bigger, one side of the ball has a bigger washer side on it or whatever. So just put the O-ring on the other side. Make sure you put the screw going in that way, so that way you don't lose it. And yeah, that'll actually allow for some pretty good articulation as well. But you just want to make sure that you can have that pivot so that when it goes underneath the axle, so you can actually see or feel, especially with the double barrels, if you're binding up with the shock or not. And that's the other thing, is making sure that your shock, if it's too high up and hitting I might get through the light there. Hitting the frame on this piece here and not allowing it to bend under, that too is going to limit your articulation. So you want to make sure that you are able to have this shock actually go under the frame a little bit. Because you can see if I drop how it goes under. So that can also be there. You can kind of tell it's how the shock is at a bow. Let's get that open. So when I go full, maybe that one you can see better. There we go. But yeah, you can see how it's actually bowing that shock, trying to twist it under. So right now that shock is actually what's stopping me. If I take that shock off, I could probably get a lot more articulation out of this. So what I can do there is actually space this out. And another way you can tell if this shock is binding is try to move this. See how tight that is compared to just sitting here? See, it's nice and loose there. But when I do that, it's tight. Can't move it. That's telling me it's binding up right there. So if I space this out a little bit more, that'll actually allow this to drop in and give me more articulation. Another thing is just having the placement of the shock. Having your shocks laid back like this will give you more articulation than compared to like this, straight up and down. Simply because you're getting more with the pivot. So now I'm getting more actual up and down movement, everything all together. And then that's another thing to stop you is your wires. So make sure your wires are all tucked and not holding you up with your servo. But having them pivoted back like that, so it actually allows, so where my mount is here, my mount is here, it actually allows that mount to come all the way up, almost parallel with that other mount, to where straight up and down, let's get the body away. Straight up and down, you can see how much farther away those two mounting points are. So that's where you get that more articulation by laying it back. Yeah, and again, the forelink, that is a very big part in getting your articulation in the front. Another thing is the actual springs themselves. When you're running the double barrel, having the tall spring that it comes with, it's just going to it's not going to allow it to drop as much as you probably want. So it may stop it like there. So you're not getting that full articulation, being able to drop up into the body, having your other one drop down. But then I also found not running any springs at all can also hinder you as well, because if you come up on something, it won't want to push it to drop down. Sometimes they might bind up getting fully stuck like that and not actually want to, especially when you have them laid back. Running no springs straight up and down, not as much of a big deal. Having them laid back and it goes like that with no spring, sometimes it doesn't want to fall. So just having that spring in there, I like running the stock springs, or that's the middle compression because I want this one to bounce a little bit. But running the stock springs is just enough to give it that push to get it past that point, I guess. Yeah, I guess those are the main things to look at when you're trying to get flex. Oh, the other thing is just your wheelbase in general. So, of course, the wider you go, the more, not necessarily flex as in how much different of a degree you are, like, having a 90 degree from your rear axle to your front axle, but it'll allow you to have your wheel up on things, like, so if you wanted to do the BIC test or whatever, having a wider front wheelbase is going to allow you to get up on taller things, just because you are extending the length of your wheelbase so it can get up on taller things. It's not necessarily giving you more flex. The other thing, though, that will give you more flex is lengthening your wheelbase, because allowing more length here will give you more of a, will give you more room, I guess, to bring that up higher and bring this one down lower. So it actually allows more articulation, I guess. I don't know how to put it in words, but yeah, by lengthening your links, it's going to give you a lot more articulation. That's why, like the Gladiator, you know, they're saying it's a lot better of a crawler than a lot of the rest because it can articulate more just because of those rear links being so long. The other thing, when you do get double barrels and then you want to do climbing hills and stuff, and so you run into that problem of it lifting the front, and then you want to do a limiting strap, running 2 limiting straps on either side, or running your limiting straps, from point to point to point, having 4 points is going to limit your flex as well as limit the amount of drop. You want either a singular point on the frame or a singular point on the axle itself. So if you run from here to here, you can loop it up to a singular point on the frame, and you want to make sure that that point is not fixed so it can slide, and that will stop the drop, but it'll allow you to still have the articulation you want, the flex you want. But having 4 points is not going to, it's going to hinder your flex as well as your drop. So you want 2 points either on the axle and 1 on the frame, or 2 points on the frame and 1 on the axle. And again, where it's the 1 point is, you want it to be able to slide. So you don't want that 1 point fixed. That's for if you want to run double barrels and do not want the lift in the front. Yeah, I don't know much of anything else I can go over. Oh, adding weight. So just getting wider, longer, adding the double barrels. You also want to add some weight to the outside. That way it's actually going to want to hold that wheel down when this one goes up. And then same in the rear, especially if you are running some springs. If you have no weight, it's just gonna, the spring's just gonna want to push the other side up. So you want to definitely be running at least a little bit of weight on the outside. I mean, even just running some stamped steel wheels, some little bit heavier wheels, that'll do it. But yeah, any other questions, let me know, and have a good day.